Welcome to the very first King Kogi airship radio broadcast. We are currently floating in the King Kogi airship. We decided that we've got this perfectly good radio room.
Exactly.
Why not keep everyone on the ship entertained a little bit with our thoughts? You know, no matter where you are on the ship right now, it's being broadcast. So we decided our first King Kogi radio broadcast is going to be about something just so nerdy. We were recently talking about this.
Well, I don't think it's as nerdy as it used to be.
It's popular now, isn't it?
Back in the day, it was really
liking
nerdy.
Anime was considered to be nerdy, right?
I wouldn't even say it was considered nerdy. I just don't think anyone knew about it.
Pretty niche, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was niche, and it was very much its own little underground world where people were like, do you know this?
And I think the internet is actually what brought a lot of us together, because that's how I started to go into forums and like meet other people and talk about animes and upload like mangas that were scanned into the computers, but all in Japanese, and you didn't know what was going on.
It was like a secret world. So on that note, we put out a little poll, and we asked you, how much do you know about One Piece? And actually the majority of you have heard of it, but haven't watched it. 13% of you have watched it and finished the Dressrosa arc, which will mean nothing to some of you and mean everything
a lot to others.
So we're not going to do any spoilers or any plot points. We're just going to kind of discuss about One Piece and just some things around our experience with anime when we were growing up. Why we decided that this is so good over everything else, because I'm sure some of you are already foaming at the mouth going like, it is not the best anime, because it is also a little, it's not everyone's cup of tea.
Because it's so long.
I think that's one of the biggest complaints, isn't it? That it's never, it's still going now.
Do you remember that commercial in Japan where they went, long, long man?
For that really long, sweet thing.
I'm going to definitely put a link to this in the info box of this commercial, because it's a whole series.
I was going to say it's a saga in itself, and we were drawn to it because of the advert. So anyway,
before this gets too long, let's give a little bit of a basis to everybody about what are the animes that we also like not just One Piece. Sailor Moon was my OG, so Sailor Moon is like one of my most favorite ones, and I think it is very different than almost every single anime out there, because the clothing, the fashion, the music, the transformations, the outrageous, why nail polish? You're just
it's pretty iconic. To be honest, I think Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball are the kind of the baseline for most modern anime now, because things like One Punch Man wouldn't exist if it couldn't parody things like Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon. But, these are 90s, 90s animes, I think. Yeah.
I think that as I made my way into living in Asia, when I moved to Korea in 2008, I really just didn't have a lot of access to anime. So I started out with Sailor Moon. Then when I went to Korea, I was recommended a lot of animes from my students. So I will confess, I did go through a romance anime stage. I'm just going to read out some of the ones that I did like and I watched. I really love Ouran Host Club, as you guys already know. I also really liked Black Butler and Vampire Knight. And Vampire Knight is outrageous. This is going to be a spoiler right the heck now. Incest! That's all I have to say. I was so shocked by the time I got to the end of it. I'm like, what am I watching and why did I like it? And then Maid Sama, which is about a teenager who is the #1 student in her school, but then she's also secretly working as a maid in a maid cafe as her part-time job. What an outrageous plot for teenagers to watch.
I think there's that whole section of anime, and
I loved it.
Those series are so Japanese.
Because,
what is a maid?
No, I know.
This
You're
whole
so
thing
right.
just doesn't make any sense. And I remember
Is she a mild prostitute is how you feel?
Well, it does feel like that, especially when you don't really,
Why is it such a dirty secret? Why is it going to ruin her life as a high school
But it's
student?
Just so Japanese to the point where unless you really understand it, it does seem quite bizarre. And you almost go, well, is this a plot point in itself?
I thought it was
it's part
fake.
of Japanese society.
Right, but I literally thought, like you're saying, I actually thought it was fake. Okay, so we digress. Other ones that I really love, I love One Punch Man, of course, and as you said, an ode to so many other animes before, because it's all about making fun of people being like, you'll never defeat me. I'm at level 5,000. You think, and he's like, yeah, sorry, the supermarket's closing soon, and there's a crab sale, so could we jump right to the fight part?
I enjoyed the first season.
Loved it.
It kind of lost its kind of direction after that.
Second season,
So anyway, it's a great show. It's fun,
love him
but
as a character.
It can't stand on its own.
Yes, exactly. Cowboy Bebop, I think we both love Cowboy Bebop. Iconic. Also, loved live action. We can talk about that another time if you guys would like us to discuss that. Samurai Champloo, I think both of us Also really enjoyed the soundtrack. What is it?
I'm looking for a samurai that smells like sunflowers.
So I never watched any of them with the. So I
only
from
have
a
the
very
dubs.
young age, I was so strict on just, it was always fan subs.
This is a rule.
Every single time.
Yeah.
I find it really difficult. And do you know what? There's the odd show that I watched with the English dubs. I think Pat Labor was I don't know if you've ever seen that. Pat Labor, great. If you know that.
Are you saying Pat Labor?
Yeah, P-A-T-A, labor, as in like I am doing hard labor.
Okay.
They're robots, of course. They're robots. They're robot police. It's Pat Labor Mobile Police Force or something.
My God. What? No, I've never even heard of this.
It's one of the best anime movies that I've ever seen, and the dub is what I had on VHS. There's Pat Labor 1 and 2. And
wait, sorry. VHS.
Yeah.
We don't even have a VHS here.
Ancient tech.
We're watching DVDs.
But Pat Labor, the first one, was really good,
Yeah.
the dub, and I will happily watch that. Ghost in the Shell was pretty good. And then even then, they had the fan subs.
Yeah.
Fan subs were really
they were
good.
the best.
Well, they really understood it because
Yeah.
one thing that I think about now, anime's everywhere. You're on Netflix, it's...
Like
you
were saying, we're talking about a topic that's nerdy, but are we? Like, it's totally mainstream
it's
now.
pretty mainstream now, isn't it?
Yeah.
But,
I'll be part of the mainstream.
But I will say the Netflix subbing, now that I can understand a bit more
the
Japanese,
Japanese,
than I could before, it's just not really like selling the
Hitting
punchline.
the mark. Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
that's side note.
You know what? Wanted to ask you a question. What is the name of that anime that you really like that I had never heard of involving like robot people? Like
That does not specific.
Oh, I
that
know
is
it
not
didn't. There it is.
specific at all.
Trigun.
That's not about robot people.
what's it about?
It's about plants, actually. But anyway, it's...
Oh, I didn't know about that
I think
one.
it's plants, anyway.
So you-
Trigun's good. Any more on the list?
I have a few more. I did like Dragon Ball. It came on before Sailor Moon. I found it really boring. I know I was only like, I think it was 1995 or 1996 when it came out in Canada. And it came on before Sailor Moon, and they just charged for so long. I just remember them being like, ah! And then it cut to the next guy, and he's like, ah! And then it just went back and forth for so long. Was not very impressed by that.
Because the OG Dragon Ball series that I watched when I was like, I watched it in Hokkaido when I was staying at my grand's.
Right.
This is in like 95 or 94, and I didn't know, I'd never seen it. And
Could you speak Japanese at that time?
Absolutely zero.
Oh, and it was just...
But luckily, the little, screen said Dragon Ball Z, and obviously I could read that. So that was my first intro to it, and it
Very
was
cool.
For those of you who know Vegeta versus Majin Buu, I didn't know this at the time because I didn't know anything about it. And he has his Super Saiyan hair yellow, right? And he's fighting Majin Buu, who's pink. I came back to England, no one had ever heard of it.
You're like, I watched this amazing show with Majin Buu and Vegeta.
Well, I didn't even know their names, but the point is that they had just in the UK got it, I think on Cartoon Network or Toonami or something like that. But anyway, this is like years later, and they were just starting the Raditz saga, and Raditz and Goku have black hair in that. It's so long until they get the Super Saiyan thing. So then people were like, "You've not even watched the right show," and I'm like, "I'm sure it was called Dragon Ball."
Oh no, gaslit by the Japanese experience.
But the animation definitely felt different.
Yeah.
I felt like I was watching a different show. So anyway, I digress.
That was a nice digression, though. And a few other ones that I liked and then didn't like. I watched Fairy Tail for a while. Now I understand that Fairy Tail feels a bit like, I'm not going to say a budget One Piece, but it's kind of like a similar One Piece adventure crew feeling. But all the characters are outrageous, and the main girl, Lucy, has a massive pair of jugs on her, and everyone hits on her because of it. So it was
Classic.
definitely more adult. Like, hey, Lucy, you're looking really good. And she's like, you idiot, I'm under attack. And he's like, what? And so he's not even paying attention. So that's very un-One Piece-like.
I've never seen Fairy Tail.
I actually read it as a PDF online where I had to flip manually through it in my classroom in Korea, because I took whatever I could. You know how we were saying how the cables broadcast different things at different times?
Yeah.
We found out that Sailor Moon was 95 to 97 for me, and it only came to the UK in was it 2000?
I think it was 2000. It's quite a while later.
That's a big difference between if you're a middle school kid like me being impacted positively by Sailor Moon, or if you're in high school. Those are two different levels of when do you enter into anime? When has it sucked you in? And then two final points, I'll say I liked Attack on Titan, then I stopped liking it because Eren was a snivelly little butt and I couldn't take it. And so that was my opinion. I couldn't get through it all. But I enjoyed the fighting. It was really cool at first.
Attack on Titan,
Such a
I
disappointment.
have mixed feelings about, because when I moved
just
to Japan,
like
it was
evangelical.
the it was everywhere, and it would just come out the first season, and it was everywhere in the sense of it was on like food packets. Kids were having like clothing with it on, like it was
everywhere.
It was on Uniqlo, like, and I remember watching it and being like, this is disgusting. Like, this is absolutely disgusting. Like, people being eaten. The Titans are kind of creepy looking.
Yep.
And the world felt...
It's daytime terror.
Yeah, and the world just felt really unsettled and uneasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was everywhere in Japan.
And for children.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. When I saw, like, 7, 8, 9-year-old kids wearing Attack on Titan t-shirts, I was just like, wow, this is a funny kind of balance.
Did
here
you watch a human
Did you watch
get
it?
torn in half?
Did you, a 7-year-old child, watch this? Anyway, so story-wise and stuff, I think as well, there is definitely a peak time. I think this is also my first point as to why I think One Piece is so good. I watched originally One Piece, I think in like 2010 or 11, and then we recently rewatched it.
I'm a total late adapter.
Yeah, well, we watched it because the live action came out.
Yeah.
And this is way over 10, 11 years later for me, and we've rewatched it, and I still think it's great. Maybe there's a little bit of nostalgia in there, but I would honestly say that, like, Attack on Titan for me it feels difficult to kind of like love, whereas I think with One Piece it's so endearing, it's actually more rich the second time around of watching it, which seems like a lot actually because there was hundreds of episodes.
Now I know you're probably a huge Maid Sama fan, but what are some other animes that you watched that I haven't mentioned?
Cowboy Bebop, Trigun, and Samurai Champloo, I always forget how to pronounce that, I think were part of our era of like the kind of interesting animation, cool music. I think the music was a big part of that.
We have Cowboy Bebop on vinyl.
Yeah, it's great. It's a really nice, kind of like mix of like music and anime. And so they were big when and I've rewatched them so many times.
Me too.
I will say this, I don't really think like they story-wise, it was always really interesting, but I don't think the world was like that developed. I think it was kind of episodical, kind of like little flashes into their world, but it wasn't like such a big, because there were only 24 episodes. I remember when I was growing up, and there's like series like Gurren Lagann, they're like 24 episodes, 26 episodes maybe. Evangelion was the same.
Okay, yeah.
And so it wraps up pretty like well. They might have been a little longer, but yeah, those were ones that I remember watching a lot. But then actually for me, and one that's I kind of think is one of the cooler animes in terms of like the characters. The story is questionable in terms of like how well it's written. I think Yu Yu Hakusho is really good.
Oh yeah,
I
you
really
recently
like Yu Yu
got me onto
Hakusho,
that one.
and we watched the live action
quite
one,
funny.
and the live action one was actually like okay. Like I didn't love it because I would honestly say the source material was a little rough. But I love the characters. And when I was younger, I used to play like a SNES game of it, and I loved it. It was just like the characters are cool, like the ray gun with that. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's just shooting a gun out of your hand.
It's a pretty crazy world. Like, it reminded me of Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon, like having a baby, because it took place in like a town with normal people. They'd go to shops, they'd eat food. Like, Sailor Moon is set in Tokyo, where you're seeing everyday slice of life. But then there's like an entirely different world with like demons and like a weird heaven hell place that has like a reception desk, which reminds me of Dragon Ball. How they're always going up into the clouds and like...
I feel like Yu Yu Hakusho and Sailor Moon were quite similar because they are based in school. And I think a lot of anime is based in school or has a school structure. And like another one that I watched and I do really enjoy, and I think the world was great, was Naruto.
I just haven't seen it. I wasn't against
Boruto,
it.
All of that was really good. I liked the world, and I think this is my sort of first glimpse into a really developed anime world, because regardless of what you think of the characters, the world itself is really interesting, and I think that led me then into appreciating One Piece, because Naruto is pretty deep, and it goes into some pretty interesting kind of like plot points. The history's really interesting.
Magic powers and stuff.
Well, not just that, but like it does a really good job in bringing the history back into the present. It's a pretty funny little kind of way they've done it, and I think it's quite a smart way of writing it. But I will say that like it kind of ran its course, and then after that you kind of go, oh well, that's done with, right? Whereas with One Piece, it just keeps going, and it doesn't really stop, and it kind of keeps rewarding you for watching longer. So I think what we're going to have to get into now is just why we like One Piece.
So I would say, as a new watcher to One Piece, because you've already seen it and you're rewatching it with me now, right? I really got an understanding of that the world is super vast, and just unfolding in front of you. And I think that that's something that I love about, I mean, even the King Kogi universe is that way. You know, like I love creating new characters and adding them to this universe. You know, we've got like Hacker Woman, Scientist Lady, you know, we have
a bunch of new aliens,
Captain Captain Duh, Admiral Badman. Like we just have all these characters. We've got King Kogis that fly, that walk. I love the idea of an expanding universe. It's very like Star Warsian in that sense, where you go to a planet and there's like some new culture there, and like the aliens are like Jabba Jabba Jabba, and it's all sandy, right? When I started watching One Piece, I thought it was just going to be like, oh, it's on a pirate ship. Like it's about people on a pirate ship. And I was so wrong. They start on the pirate ship, gather a crew. These are like the first few arcs, journey through the ocean to an island. But all the islands change. All the things that happen to them in the ocean are different. There's so many different characters on every single island.
I think the biggest thing for me about how the world builds is actually more that it starts small and builds quite like significantly. But you know, Luffy starts in a little barrel, and like, you know, he meets Kobe and then goes from there. And it's following the same thing as the live action. So for those of you who have been following the live action, it is pretty much in parallel to the way that the anime works. I would just say the only difference is that the more the world builds, the more richer certain things become. However, the first, I don't know, 150, 200 episodes, which sounds like a lot, is a lot of just adventures, and you are encountering a lot of things for the first time. But then what you've just kind of hinted on is a lot of things then start to reference back quite consistently throughout the show, and you start to go and get these rewards almost for watching and following from the start. So for example, Kobe is a really interesting character because you see him first of all as this scared little kid, and him and Luffy are kind of just hanging out, and Luffy's just like, get more confidence, and then further on down the line they meet again and is a very different character, and that is the first time you kind of really get rewarded for going, oh, he's like developed and changed.
I was going to say actually Nami and Arland, because if you have, I've seen a lot of people in the comments said that they've watched the live action, but they haven't watched the anime. And I was reading these out to you. Some people were saying they were worried that the anime would like spoil the TV show for them and stuff. And that is actually incorrect.
I think it's the other way around. I think actually the anime enriches the live action because it has a lot more to the world that I think the live action has done a really interesting job of like kind of making it cinematic, and I think that's one thing that's I personally like about One Piece, and I think that it does stand out, and it's quite subtle, but every shot is quite cinematic. They don't really do these kind of throwaway shots. Everything looks epic, and like, you know, these worlds that they build, the places they go to, even like, you know, obviously like the fights and the kind of action scenes are pretty well done as well. But I would say the world feels very epic.
Yeah, so for example, if you go to an island and you go to a town in One Piece, all the people you meet, you don't just meet, you know how like in Dragon Ball, you go to these different towns and villages, and they're not really like, they never expand. It's like the same looking people, the way that they're drawn, they have the same kind of cars.
Well, they're kind of like, and I hate to say this, but they're kind of like a disposable city. They're basically, they're there to get blown up.
Yeah.
And then brought back by the Dragon Balls.
Exactly, and everything's fine.
Zero consequence.
Yeah, and then what I was going to say is when you go to an island in One Piece, and then there's a town, the town will be filled with people. And the people will often have shops, izakayas, clothing stores, there's grocery stores.
Yeah.
You know, there's like a feeling that we are also arriving, like kind of like when you first watch Harry Potter and Hogwarts, you're arriving at a location and learning so much about this culture.
But what I would say is from the second watch through of the anime of One Piece, is there's so much like deep Japanese culture in every island, and essentially they kind of take something from Japanese culture and kind of like make that the focus, or they take it from another culture, and there's a lot of this where they kind of take something from like European culture or like some kind of like old like tale or fable.
What are the paella people? They're like, we make paella, and I'm like, what? They're like,
they were like a side thing, weren't they?
And it was like giants that make paella or something.
Was that Groggy and Broggy? Who knows?
Who knows, right?
But I like the way that they take real culture, and a lot of it is inspired from like actual pirate history and lore, and some of the names are and stuff like, I mean, like one of the characters is called Blackbeard. Well, there's this book I'm reading called How to Be More Pirate, and they refer to so many parts of the historical parts of the golden age of being a pirate, you know, the golden age of pirates, whatever they call it. And so many of the words and the wording and the referencing is referenced then in One Piece. directly from the history books. So
of real pirates.
That for me was quite interesting in how it's been, like, the source material has been borrowed.
Yeah.
But that's a bit geeky in terms of, like, a bit of history.
Is it a bit geeky? Even though there are a lot of episodes, and as we said, it's a very rewarding series where when you stick through it, something you learned in, like, I'm going to say season, but they're called arcs, aren't they?
I think so.
Because it's like a storyline, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing when you look on Netflix as well, but, like, yeah, they're in arcs, and each arc isn't the same amount of episodes.
Okay, so here's a basic breakdown of how an arc would work, and jump in whenever you want to here. I would basically say that the crew is on a ship. They are going to an island. They can be stopped along the way in the ocean and face something, but generally speaking, you're going to an island. You're going to meet the locals. You're going to get to know the culture. It's going to be a good person and a bad person. You're going to know right away who's who, and you're going to know who they're going to side with, which is the good people. They don't like injustice. You will get to know what injustice means to them as well, and then they will always step in. And then the battle will ensue, and you'll find out if it's just a bad guy that they defeat and kind of move on from, or you might be entering in like, this guy's bad, but guess what? There's someone even badder behind that. So you slowly have these like bigger and bigger reveals, which can cause arcs to kind of like go on longer than other arcs.
Yeah, and they definitely have more development the further you go in. And so the first few arcs are just collecting the crew. So back to the live action, you are just kind of, the story is, I would say, simpler because it's just character based.
Yeah.
The crossover, which I noticed a lot more in the second time watching it, is the world starts to get introduced to you more once the crew is together. So I guess
it's building the Scooby gang at the beginning, basically.
Well, it's just collecting the gang together, which is great. And that's, I think you mentioned in Buffy, and we've been starting to rewatch Buffy. Luffy and Buffy, very similar
Very
names,
similar, yeah.
are the strongest characters, and it kind of evolves around them, and it's not just about punching through stuff that wins the day, sort of thing. The where I think One Piece expands a little bit more than most shows is that the more the world expands, the more curious you are about it. And I think this is the big thing about One Piece that has been kind of part of it. I think the world just starts to get richer after a point, not for the characters, because you've kind of amassed your crew. You start to just learn what is going on in the world.
I do also think the crew also gets richer, because for those of you that are watching the live action one, right, you've met Nami and you've probably met Arland. And I thought that when I first met Arland, that was the worst, awfulest villain that I have ever met. I was so mad at him and I hated him. Then I found out later on that there are going to be worse villains, Martina. So prepare for that. But when you go to Fishman Island, which I like to also call Mermaid Island, one of my favorite seasons ever for Sanji.
Either or.
When you go to Fishman Island, you begin to learn about Arland. So if you're watching the live action, Arland, you're going to learn about his childhood. Okay, so we've learned about Nami, and now we're going to learn about his, and it's going to rock your world. But it takes a while to get there.
Well, put it this way.
So rewarding.
For me, there is a big revelation with Fish Island that completely changes your perspective on the Arlon whole saga, and it really covers why is Arlon the way he is, and then you start to, and if you've seen the live action, you might be like, he's the bad guy, right?
Because I was so furious at Arlon.
But you start to feel sorry for Arlon because you understand why he's like that. And that is a really interesting part of One Piece, and I think that's one of the first times, and Nami has to deal with it.
Yep.
And she takes it in such an
intriguingly adult way. Yeah, exactly.
Um,
But you know what the problem is? The people on the cast right now already look old. I don't mean like bad old. I just mean they look older. And if you look at the Harry Potter timeline, which they did, 8 movies? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
And they started them off really young, and those kids locked into that deal until they became older. How long would these because these are adults, they're in their like 20s.
Yeah.
I mean, they're definitely in their 20s, and so you're locked in for like, let's say 8 years. You're going to finish in your 30s. Like, I don't know if they could barely keep the Stranger Things kids together.
I was going to say, I don't think it's going to go down the Stranger Things route.
So if you feel unsatisfied, come join us in the anime.
I was going to say, that's the thing, is that if you feel sad about the idea that the live action can't I mean, it may go on to season 3. It may go on. I predict season 4, because they're going to have a few new characters in the new one. I just think, honestly, it will kind of peter out. But at that point, that's when you jump on over to the anime.
Yep. And I know that it feels like overwhelming when you see the number of them. It's just a really well put together world is what we're getting at. And so it is actually worth it. But you shouldn't really think of it that way, because you think of it as like, I can just have as many as I want and get to know, like Usopp.
Well, there's no rush. You don't have to watch it all in one go.
Wagwan.
And like, you know, we've all got exceptionally good at binging stuff, you know, so.
Maybe we got to practice not binging stuff.
Yeah.
Or binge it, because it's going to take forever.
I was going to say, you need to try very hard to get through this.
What is that? Stop crying. You have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. The one thing I would definitely say, though, is how One Piece develops is it goes from being quite, like, I wouldn't say, like, it's a bit carefree. And then I think the further down you go into, and the further into the story and the world you delve into, you realize it's actually a lot darker than you than it comes across. And what I mean by that is the subjects and how certain situations come about. No spoilers, but these are kind of like the sort of parts of the story they have to deal with. They have to deal with like kids being drugged. They have to deal with people who have had their shadows taken away from them and they can't go in the sunlight, otherwise they'll die. Like some really quite like harrowing, like
Brooke.
You know, things.
Meeting Brooke.
Oh my gosh.
Like Brooke's entire backstory
is awful, because he has been just like constantly on his own.
Alone.
Yeah, because he can't die. And so there's these really, like, when you really step back from it being an anime, you kind of go, actually, like, you know, as from a human perspective, you go, wow, this is actually quite intense.
But it's not as intense as something like Attack on Titan, where they make you feel bleak. I think the whole point of One Piece
is... And it's gross as well. Like, Attack on Titan is pretty gross.
Yeah, I don't want to watch that all the time, personally, you know. I mean, it's the same thing with Demon Slayer, which we didn't talk about, but, like, Demon Slayer is also pretty gory for children in Japan to be watching. I'm always like, really?
Well, I think...
it's a pretty intense intro. Have you seen it? It's like The Walking Dead.
Yeah, it is very much like that. And one of the most, like, kind of, like, creepy moments in the whole thing is when you learn about how I'm trying to do this with no spoilers, how someone's powers have affected an entire island for 10 years, and you go, they've been living in this, and you go, what the...
And you ask so many questions about how the psychology of the person has survived this. You're like, how have they lived being in this trap situation for so... And then you're like, never mind, because there's just so many bad things happening.
But it's quite crazy how they build in these... And I think it's well written because it doesn't need to show anything graphic. It just lays a concept out and you go, wow, like,
and
that's a lot.
You know what my favorite part is about One Piece? After all these heavy things you've seen, after all the stuff you've gone through, every arc is going to end with a party. It is so such a relief, you know. They will party with the people that have made it through, the good people. They will only be happy. Everybody will do crazy faces. They'll drink. They'll eat huge food. The girls will sunbathe or read a book. Brooke will play piano. Like, always there's a celebration. And I think that's such a nice way to wrap up something that can be quite like heavy. And then they'll like set sail again, and you know that they're heading to their next arc. So you yourself are satisfied, and sometimes they'll put in between that like a softer episode, especially if you're coming off of something like Dressrosa.
You can call that filler, but I would say one of the, and I don't
it's very low on filler.
I don't think many people would lean too heavily into the idea that it has filler, because I would say most animes have an obscene amount of filler. You just need to go on Wiki to see like what episodes are and aren't in canon. Naruto's really bad for it.
Sailor Moon doesn't really have a lot of filler.
Bleach is terrible for filler.
Oh no,
I think
is
there's
it?
whole seasons of filler, basically.
I also haven't seen Bleach.
I really enjoy Bleach, but it did get to a point when they kind of like, I felt the ideas were just...
Puttering.
I wasn't really enjoying it as much as I did the original kind of arc. I think one of the best things I found about One Piece is I think it's got one of the deepest rabbit holes, or one of those icebergs, or whatever it is, because there are so many questions that aren't answered in One Piece that are
it's a bit
still
like Lost
unanswered.
Sometimes.
Yeah,
like,
and
why the polar bears?
Yeah, exactly. But there are so many parts of the world where you go and you get these really tantalizing like hints.
Glimmers, yeah.
And then you go and they sort of like tease an idea, and then they go, anyway, back to the crew.
I thought I was upset about Nami's backstory. And then I met Robin. And I was like, oh my God. I like cried. And then I met Law. Trafalgar, what is it?
Traffy. Traffy's on.
Or something. And what is it? Trafalgar. And I'm like, sounds like marbles in your mouth. You meet more and more characters, and there'll be these little loop backs to you understanding things about Robin more, or understanding what she means for why she's looking for this book. Like, you can eventually enjoy the characters individually, which I think is kind of a bit like why I was getting at with Firefly and Buffy. You can like Buffy. You can like Xander. You can like Willow. You can like Spike. You can like Angel, Cordelia for some reason, even though she's terrible. But with One Piece, you can have the characters get separated from the crew, and you can have...
And they normally do. I think that's the one thing after a while.
It's not like they're all just stuck together being like, we're together.
You kind of like not see Luffy for quite a few episodes sometimes because the rest of the
Nami
crew...
got separated with Sanji and someone else.
Exactly. So it is kind of interesting because you then don't rely on one character to be the person you're following.
Exactly.
Luffy is very much the guide of where they're going, but how they deal with everything around them is very much individual, and it's way more kind of like relatable because you feel like one of the crew, as in, where's this crazy captain taking us?
Or where would I be amongst these people, right? And one of my favorite examples of this is that, what is it, Moria's Island, Thriller Bark.
Thriller Bark.
So there's a really hilarious kind of gothy zombie arc called Thriller Bark. It's really, really funny. And I love it because 3 of the most cowardly characters on the boat, so Usopp, Nami, and Chopper, which Chopper's always funny because he can turn into like a monster, but he's always still scared. These 3 got separated together, while all the people who are really strong that have like swords or they're Luffy, everybody was somewhere else. And watching those 3 walk around, scream non-stop because a zombie comes down, and they're just like... and their eyes are like bugging out of their faces because you go, that would be me if I didn't have my captain.
It's kind of weirdly relatable, isn't it? Like you would be like, oh, they feel so vulnerable because you go, I know they're weak. Like they don't actually have any powers, and so it's really interesting.
Yeah. And you know what? I think this is the perfect transition point for us to talk about a complaint about One Piece. People don't love the fact that One Piece has such gigantic girl breasticles.
It's quite basic actually in the original one because it started in 1999, I think. It's quite an old anime, but
what does this have to do with breasts, Dan?
Well, the reason I mentioned this is that it's a noticeable switch.
You mean the size of the boobs?
Yes,
just
because in 2 years everyone goes from like a B cup at the most to like, you know, triple
G's or something. Yeah, exactly. The female creatures in One Piece have unexplained ginormous tututas and tiny little waists and extremely long legs. So even if you're a fish person, you're like, hello, I'm a fish person. They're just like a boing, and you're like, how do I feel?
But I think it is an artistic choice because it's not made to be a kind of like part of the plot points in a way. So what I would definitely say that I personally find is something I'm glad about with watching One Piece is that things like Naruto, like Dragon Ball's guilty of this as well. It's like the whole like old man nosebleed thing.
Sailor Moon has it. Ray's grandfather is a big old perv who looks up their skirts.
Yeah, I would say that's a really like bizarre part of Japanese kind of like storytelling that I think is really uncomfortable to watch because it kind of like...
Why is it making it a comedy?
It makes it relatable for like pervs to be like, oh, it's okay to perv on little girls because, I mean, there's that really famous scene in Dragon Ball, the original one, when Bulma lifts up her skirt to show Muten Roshi and he has a nosebleed and then I think something happens after that. But the point is that that's a really bizarre thing to like to have as she's a young girl as well in that. But anyway, the point is that in One Piece there is no
there's none of that, honestly.
You know, it's more like an aesthetic as opposed to it being used for anything. You said about that girl in Fairy Tail, like no one uses their like sexuality because I think in One Piece it's actually an incredibly unsexual show.
we know what we were saying. We were saying, I think we become the pervs because when you watch One Piece, none of the, let's say male to female, whoever wants to hit on whoever, right? None of them hit on each other. There's no like talking of like if someone's married, they're just like married and they just have a child and then they'll be like, now they're an adult.
They actually don't insinuate marriage.
No.
They insinuate the ideas of kings and queens and like this kind of pretty ancient
couples moving with each other holding something that's their baby, but they never show like wedding rituals.
But there's never been a wedding.
There's no dating.
I don't think.
There's no, I can't think of one. There's no like, you know, oh, you should go out with her. Like nobody talks to each other about hitting on women.
That's the thing. The big thing for me is that a lot of anime is school related. Naruto is school related.
True.
You know, Sailor Moon, Yu Yu Hakusho.
Dragon Ball, not really, but kind of. But you are learning how to punch.
They go to school because Chi-Chi's constantly saying like they need to get the grades and not fight. But
Maid-sama's definitely in school, or on Host Club is in school. Vampire Night takes place in school.
Yeah.
Does anything not take place in school?
One Piece doesn't take place in school, and it's actually so detached from the school kind of like tier system. There's no teachers, there's no like student like you get the behavior of students, of like young kids, but you don't have a school surrounding them.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most freeing parts of the show, where you're not kind of like bound by watching a school kind of like structure. You're actually just watching a bunch of random ragtag like crew just going through and just being like, how do we deal with this? And they generally, I would say, they're not that smooth. It isn't just punch your way through it. In fact, most of the time, if you throw Zoro into something, he's like, I'm going to cut it. But actually, that doesn't really work half the time. He eventually does cut through stuff, but it really is kind of an interesting way of watching them figure it out, but like kind of bumbling their way through. And that is the fun part, where you kind of go...
It's like Buffy that way.
Yeah, and they really, at some points, and I would say this for almost every single arc, you're just going, impossible.
They're never going to get out of this.
They cannot get out of this.
That's it, they're dead.
They're done.
Is the last
this
one.
is it. There's no more episodes.
Yeah.
You know there's thousands more afterwards. But they
Don't
still
scare them.
give you that feeling, and it's a really satisfying feeling that when they resolve it, you go, well, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, because you know what I really like about, this is like a randomness factor about One Piece that I really enjoy. I also think the way that Luffy and characters choose to escape a battle is not actually very predictable, because Luffy's not predictable. So you will go, they can't get out of it, and then Luffy will just start rolling, or he'll start jumping, or they'll
have a plan, and then Luffy will just be gone, and then he's just run in, like
ruin the
guns
plan
blazing, and the plan's gone to absolute shit.
Exactly. And so you're really you yourself aren't sure where they're going to go. Well, I felt like Dragon Ball, that felt really predictable for me after a while. I think if you've not seen Dragon Ball Abridged, it's absolutely amazing, and it's the Dragon Ball that I now remember.
It's the only Dragon Ball I know now.
Vegeta. He's got a Pokemon, Vegeta. Vegeta. I think we digressed and we left the topic, which was talking about gigantic boobs. And I just want to say the final thing is that there's no sexuality. Sanji does want to hit on women, and he has the nosebleeds and he has the big hearts and eyes, but he's actually a gentleman. Like, he never tries to grab women or try to kiss them. In fact, that makes him really mad when people try to hurt women or force themselves. He turns
kind
into
of
like
old-fashioned.
He's so old-fashioned, but he's also a bit of like a teenager who grew up on a ship full of boys, and he's probably just like, women. And so I love Sanji. His character's hilarious. It's never really delves into like an actual sexual realm. And so I thought that was really refreshing. I know the boobs are big. It gets worse. Like, just Rosa, what's her name?
Rebecca is, I would say this is like a little...
I'm sure she's on the screen right now.
I think as well, to segue from the boobs, why would we want to talk about anything else but boobs? But no, to segue from...
So round, and they just don't... I believe that they have no nipples, by the way. That's a fact.
No, and nor do the men. So, equal.
Men don't have nipples, women don't have nipples, guys have an 8-pack. It's not our world. It's not Sailor Moon. We're not perving on children. They're creatures from another galaxy. And on a funny note, I think we would have to talk about the outrageous villains and their insane laughs. That is alone why you should be watching One Piece.
Actually, do you know what's one thing to go alongside that? There's a lot of laughing in One Piece, and I don't just mean like evil villain laughing. Like, the crew laugh with each other.
There is.
Other characters that you meet along the way laugh with the crew.
Everyone has a distinct laugh, like a Pokemon. And so in Pokemon world really, has a sound, right?
It's quite funny. Now, we're going to play a little kind of mini game here, because I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen on headphones to a laugh from the show, and I'm going to imitate it, and you're going to tell me which character.
Oh no!
And you're also going to tell us which character it is.
Just join in. All right. Now, you might go, he's having a mental breakdown, but actually, this is pretty, I would say, I'm not an expert at this, but I'm going to give it my best
Think of it
go.
like watching Pokemon. All the Pokemon have different sounds.
It's like them going Pika Pika, but it's a laugh.
Yeah.
Okay. You ready for this?
Yes.
I'm going to put the mic away over here.
Is it that weird, creepy guy who does like zombie experiments on people and stuff? He's like...
Correct. Dr. Hogback.
Yes.
That is who it is.
He had a crazy laugh.
Oh, this is a good one. This is going to be relevant soon.
It's not Crocodile, is it? Is Crocodile?
It is Crocodile. We need to pitch me down a bit. Oh, okay.
Mugiwara.
There's another one. This is a good one. Okay, this will be funny.
I love Crocodile.
Okay.
not that pink girl, is it? The pink hair?
Yes, it is.
She's got the big, huge eyes. Actually, kind of looks like me right now. I just realized that.
I'm going to do my best to do this, and it's pretty obvious for those of you who've seen the show, but like...
Just tilting it away from me because I almost glanced.
I don't know. It's I know. You'll know who it is. Okay.
Don Flamingo in the house.
Correct. That's a pretty good one, actually. I've not actually tried it before.
Very good. Don't you feel empowered when you do it?
Training for that one.
When you do the Don Flamingo laugh, because he has the best evil villain, and him in Crocodile. But when you do it, when you try to do it halfway, like no, you have to really
commit.
Get your
I realized I had a split-second thought. I was like, I can't half-ass
this. You have to. Yeah. If you don't commit, you're not as cool as him. And his ridiculous walk. What is it? It's like.
Oh my god! It's just the best. It's
like
just like legs akimbo. So just to wrap it up, really, is this world is deep, and you don't all have to jump into it. It might not be for some of you. Obviously, I think as well, people don't have the time to just commit to something like this. It took a little bit of work to get you kind of like ready for it. And I think the first, especially with maybe the first, like, and I hate to use numbers, but the first 150-ish episodes.
You're gonna scare them off.
Well, I think you could jump in, where the live action leaves off, or you could even watch the second season and jump in after that. But the point is that the characters you'll know roughly who the characters are, and that won't change because the way they develop will just keep building and keep building. And I think it's really fun to have come in from a different angle, because I think for me the only thing is that if you enjoyed the Luffy from the live action, it will only get better.
Yeah, you'll like both Luffys.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the way to go from this, or you just watch the live action one. I would say this as well, it gets quite rewarding quite quickly, and I think it's just the crew gathering bit that can feel a little bit kind of like draggy, but honestly, it's good stuff.
Look, we fast forwarded a couple episodes. Like I really reached a maximum point with Usopp. That's what I'll say.
Oh yeah.
And so don't be afraid to fast forward some stuff, because sometimes they like kind of juice a character's sadness, and I get it, but like I don't really care about this character that much. Now, I love Usopp.
Do you know what?
Fast forwarded some of those.
Maybe the live action does a good job in fast forwarding that, because it is a bit draggy, because I think where season 2 kicks off with
Chopper needs to be compressed.
Yeah.
Not him, but the part with the cherry blossom
and the whole
snow.
Alabasta kind of arc is where the crews start, and it is where you start to get some very significant characters
and some serious villains showing up,
exactly.
Like Crocodile, who's the best.
So the live action really does a good job in condensing that. So it doesn't matter if we like it, if you're enjoying it, and then you go, I want something more than this, it's there waiting for you.
And wouldn't it be nice in 2 years' time, when I finally catch up to more One Piece episodes, that you guys can say, hey Martina, hey Dan, we started the live action or the anime 2 years ago when you put out that radio broadcast, and now we're on episode 823. Don't scare them away, Martina.
Okay, so I think we've rambled on about One Piece for long enough.
What do you mean?
Some of you may at this point just be like, I'm never going to watch this show. You have put me off this. But I'm hoping that the majority of you go, hell yeah, I'm going to watch this. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And, let us know in the comment section all the types of animes you like, ones you don't like, what you're watching now. Let's share it. The King Kogi community is a very cool place. I think some of you are new to the channel, and some of you have been around for a very long time. This community loves to chit-chat, express opinions in a very nice way. I think we have the nicest community on the planet.
Don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. Passengers, crewmates, explorers, everybody. Amazing behavior, everybody.
And we appreciate everyone's support, and thank you for just coming along on the ride.
I think up next, we might, if you guys like this, do a couple more things like reviews of DVDs. We've recently watched The Bodyguard, and that was wacky.
We have things to discuss about that. How it was a blockbuster hit back in the day, I do not know. It is confusing.
Well, everyone, thank you for enduring this radio broadcast. Keep keeping it cool on the King Kogi airship, and we will see you all on the internet. Captain Martina out.
Am I Sailor Dan?
You said it sounds like Sailor Moon.
It does sound like
What
Sailor
about First Mate Dan? Someone suggested that in the comments.
There we go. First Mate Dan.
First Mate Dan.